Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today we're diving into some RPG horror stories. These are my favorite kinds of stories to kind of cover and read, and I hope you all enjoy them as well. I know this isn't quite everyone's cup of tea, but I really appreciate those of you who aren't quite familiar with the RPG space or D&D space to sit down and listen to these, because I really enjoy making these ones. This one's brought to us by Grand Red Larceny. The players want to limit the DM influence. So this is something that has never really happened to me before. I've been a DM for a while, not extremely experienced or anything like that, but I've run a few games. So a few weeks ago, I started talking to someone I know, and they mentioned they had a group of friends looking for a DM and asked if I could do it. Since I really like D&D, I didn't think twice and said sure. I met with this group for a session 0 of sorts to discuss what they were looking for in a game. Here's what they told me. They wanted someone to run Curse of Strahd for them, which is fine. That is one of my favorite modules, but that's where problems came up. I told them I'd be happy to, as Curse of Strahd has a lot of variables and ways to make things interesting. That was when a player stopped me mid-sentence and said, before you start, I want to make sure you're running it without change. I want you to not influence the module at all. Don't even change a comma. I hate when DMs think they know better than the folks at D&D. That was strange, to say the least, but I understand wanting to run something as it was intended, and I said I would definitely follow the module. However, the player continued. No, you shouldn't even use dialogue that isn't in the module, okay? That's how D&D is meant to be played. Also, you need to roll dice out in the open for us to see. Things felt really strange to me. I know I'm not experienced or anything, but this didn't feel normal, so I asked them plainly what they were expecting of me. And this one player, who seemed to be speaking for the group, said, "We hate when DMs abuse their powers and manipulate the world. That's why we only play modules and make sure the DMs don't change a single thing from them." I imagine my expression didn't seem too good when he said that, because what followed were a bunch of complaints about DMs, and for me, it sounded way too close to player versus DM mentality. It went on for a while, but there was no way I was DMing for them. I'm barely experienced enough to deal with normal players, and to me, this definitely isn't normal. Honestly, at that point, they were expecting me to be an AI simulator for their game with a voice, which is not at all what I'm looking for. I told them that, and they weren't going to be a good fit. As expected, they didn't like my response and started to angrily shout that I was wasting their time, that I wasn't a true DM, etc. That being said, I will no longer be DMing for this group, or for anyone that this friend of mine introduces me to. I'm just glad it didn't go beyond a session 0. Okay, first off, my first note that I have is yikes, because that's what this is. This is a yikes interaction. My only guess would be is that these players had a previous interaction with a DM who made it a DM versus players thing and permanently ruined all future DM interactions with these players to cause this kind of hostile reaction. And if you've ever read a module, modules, yes, do have a set structure, but the whole point of a module is it's supposed to be something you and your party can expand upon and react to. Because it's just because of player choices, it's almost impossible to follow a module beat for beat and expect everything to go without a hitch. That's why modules are so in-depth as they are, and why they give you so many opportunities and variables to play with. Curse of Strahd is actually one that I really want and I'm excited to play with because it has one of those. I also know that Icewind Dale is also a really, really good module to play with. But right now I'm looking forward to Spelljammer. Woo! No, but seriously, it feels like these players have a player versus DM mentality as brought up previously, and they see it more as they're playing against the DM, and they don't like the idea that the DM can fudge roles, or can change the environment, or make things to counter players, etc., etc. They want a defined storyline, and if that's what they're looking for, they'd be better off playing a video game or something else. This is actually really sad that I can only assume they had an experience that really soiled D&D for them to have them have this kind of reaction. Also, did they really just want NPC tree dialogue that wasn't reactive what the players were doing? That doesn't sound fun. Go fucking play Skyrim if that's what you want. This one is by, I don't think I can say that out loud. Anyways, DM ruins gaming group trying to emulate Critical Role. This was back when CR had just started their second campaign. The group was the DM, me, and 4 other people. The DM and one of the players were really into Critical Role, to the point where the first half hour to hour of every session was just the 2 of them talking about Critical Role. Eventually, the DM starts introducing characters from the series, starts telling us what we should do, because they did that in Critical Role, and starts trying to copy Matt Mercer's particular DM style, to the point I wasn't having any fun and I felt like I had no agency and our actions in game had no point since he'd attempted to retcon things or ignore things to get a particular outcome. Eventually came to a head when one of the guys dropped out, and that was the push for me to say the same. I love playing, but I'm not a huge Critical Role fan, and I have no interest in blanketly copying other people's stories. DM reacted badly and went on a tirade about how he's playing D&D properly, and we were ruining the game for him and that one other player. Tried to tell him that he's ruining the game for all the players except one, and she was getting clear favoritism because she was going along with it, attempting to recreate scenes from the series. Even tried to explain that Matt Mercer has his own style. He has years of experience, probably took lessons in acting and improv, and has a team of people to help him with writing, and that it's his career. He just accused me of being jealous of Matt Mercer and not knowing what D&D really is. Saw him post in a Discord server not too long after, and he was explicitly looking for people who watch and like Critical Role. Hope he found a group of like-minded people to play with. He was a great DM before he decided that Matt Mercer is the only standard of DMing. I know I've seen people commenting this in my comment section and also just in Reddit threads, but the popularity of Critical Role and Dimension 20 have both been phenomenal for D&D, but also really bad, because it's led a lot of people down a road where they feel like they have to copy or mimic Matt Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan because of how entertaining their campaigns are. It's okay to get inspiration from them, but you don't want to be a carbon copy. You want to be you. That's what makes D&D fun. When I go and play D&D with my friends, I don't want to be playing with their impression of Matt Mercer. I want to be playing with them. This one's brought to us by That Water American. The worst case of railroading I've ever seen. We were playing a cyberpunk game where a drug gang themed to the Wizard of Oz had taken over an abandoned nightclub. These guys weren't wearing clothes. They had undergone exotic body sculpting surgery so the Tin Men look as they do in the movie, and the scarecrows are lanky and wearing old clothes and burlap. Our team wanted to sneak past them, as there were almost 20 gangsters all dressed the same, and they were all confused and high on their own supply, some smashing their heads against the wall. Plus, our real prize was in the nightclub's basement. Our team's journalist asked if he could do an internet search to learn more about the Wizard of Oz. GM agrees, and the journalist rolled very high on a library check. The GM says, "You don't know what the Wizard of Oz is, so you can't look it up." The journalist says he'll look for Tin Man and Scarecrow, because many cyberpunk booster gangs are basically cosplayers with guns. Someone even floats the idea of dressing up as Dorothy, but the GM says we don't know what that is. The GM further clarifies that the Wizard of Oz exists, but the movie's 105 years old at this point and doesn't show up in any resources. The journalist offers to go to a physical library and roll again, but the GM says no, which is wild because how did the gang learn about them? Regardless, the party recognizes that everyone in the gang is either scarecrows or tin men. They ask to look for a costume store where they can get outfits that look like the characters. GM reiterates that they aren't wearing costumes. They had surgery to look like this. He also says there is no costume shop or party store anywhere in Night City. Stores only carry brand new cyberpunk clothes because of supply chain issues. We ask if there's a community theater or even a high school with a drama department because they would have a costume and makeup shop. The GM relents and says we can go to one of the theaters. It's closed and locked up. We ask about breaking in. The GM says you start to pick the locks, but you realize it's extremely unlikely that they will have costumes that fit a 105-year-old movie, and you decide not to. Jesus fuck, man. We confirm that scarecrows underwent surgery, but clarify that they are physically wearing burlap and old flannel. We explain to the GM that if they found enough for 20 people, it should not be hard for us to find it. One of the booster gangs is literally dressed like clowns. There must be a thrift store or a gardening supply store or something where they got their clothes. The GM says no. As players, we got frustrated because we didn't want an all-out fight, and we said this to the GM directly. It felt like our role-playing options were evaporating, so we fuck around a little bit. We collectively float getting sci-fi body sculpting surgery since, rules-wise, it's low cost and can be done in an afternoon. And afterwards, we could just pay the same price to get changed back to our original form when we're done. The GM blew up at the idea of everyone getting exotic body modification surgery and took the reins. Here's how this is going to work. You go back to the nightclub. There are 5 guys at the door. There are 2 guys at the back door. What do? From there, we played the rest of the scenario as intended, meaning we killed everyone over a 3-hour combat encounter, and then our characters needed a week to recover from their injuries. Now, I have seen some pretty yikes railroading in my day. I would have rather taken like a DM player insert character that runs in and starts the fight than I would this. This one made me physically uncomfortable reading this. Now, there are different flavors of GM, yes, and some people prefer the more combat-orientated aspect of it. My guess would be this is one of those GMs. He prefers the combat. He likes playing against his players. He's not a fan of the roleplay and world-building aspect of it. But it seems like his players do enjoy that. So there's a bit of a conflict between what the GM wants and what the players want. And that's probably something that has to be communicated, and because of that, it's creating these really awkward railroad instances like, the GM deciding midway through a lock-picking skill check of like, yeah, but you realize midway through it's just probably not there. That is painful, man. This one's brought to us by SilkSmooth32. Player is furious my big bad evil guy is too sympathy-inducing. Hey folks, hope you're having a good day. Also, forgive my mistakes in grammar. English isn't my native language. I'll try to keep this short. I've been DMing for a group for roughly 2 years now, and due to my style of DMing, which involves lots of foreshadowing, clues, etc., they've just now met the big bad evil guy. The thing is, when I was creating this particular fellow, I wanted to try something different from my usual. This particular villain has one wish and one wish only. He wishes to die. Due to some circumstances, he's cursed with immortality. Yeah, we've all heard the story before, but I've never actually run with such a story. I've always viewed immortality as the worst curse one can have upon oneself. To see everyone you've ever connected with crumble and disappear. To witness funeral after funeral. To never truly allow yourself to love or to be loved, for it will be ephemeral. And, in the end, only you would stand, living if you can call that a life. But why is he a villain, you ask? His life is painful, his existence is suffering. He wishes to end and will do everything in his power to do so. He has tried many ways, but none of them have really worked. Now, he will try the ultimate way. He will bring down the realm. He'll destroy everything, for when all is gone, he hopes he will be as well. I thought it would be an interesting narrative and a story to have a less power-hungry villain character. So we've been building up to it over these 2 years. Now they have finally faced him and have learned of his ultimate goal, his reasoning, his pain. This happened last session and we ended on a cliffhanger when they learned about it. The problem arose when we ended the session, which I thought was absolutely amazing. One of my players became absolutely pissed. He started to shout angrily with words that I will really not write down, as I'm sure they will not fit the sub. He claimed that I was ruining D&D for him, that villains should be villains, that he didn't play to feel sympathy for his enemies. He claimed I was an absolute asshole for trying to make him feel pity for someone they should defeat, and things really escalated even though I tried to de-escalate the situation. My other players tried to reason with him, saying that it was a good story and all that, but he was having none of it. Truth be told, I've never seen someone that angry before, which honestly did make me slightly taken aback. He left my house, where we host our game, almost storming out. I apologized to the players who remained there and told them that that was not my intention. They seemed to have enjoyed the story and not really bothered by it, but the situation is sour, to say the least. Now, here I am, considering that I should just stick with run-of-the-mill cartoon villains, which honestly isn't what I like, but I don't want to go through something like this again. Well, this is my story. I'm sure it's not as horrifying as some out there, but well, it really did a number on my self-confidence as a DM. Cheers, folks. Too long didn't read. A player got furious because the big bad evil guy had a very sympathetic story and stormed out after cussing me, which led to the mood of our table being soured. So, if this was this player's honest reaction to the setting, that might be someone you want to check in on because they probably have something else going on in their life and maybe you hit too close to home. This doesn't seem like a reaction that I would expect. Most people don't usually act out like this, I guess. So I can only either assume that that they were having either a really bad day, or because English was not the poster's native tongue, some details have been misinterpreted. Personally, I'm a big fan of I kind of call this the Asgore trope now from Undertale, but I like the idea of a villain who, they're fine with the player characters killing them, but at the end of the day, they're not going to hold back because they still have their mission or their goal. They can't rely off of the player characters to do what they've probably tried themselves hundreds of thousands of times. You also open the opportunity for players to have a non-violent solution to the campaign, which is always an interesting way to approach it. That being said, the villain concept is definitely an interesting and fun one, but I would definitely check in on that player who had the outburst because they've probably got more going on than what was described within this D&D session. This one's brought to us by WillSmithSlap_MP4, and please do not go and harass this individual. Am I in the wrong for permanently killing one of my player's characters? I have been DMing a group of 5 for over 2.5 years, and I recently killed off the party's warlock by turning it into a deathlock. This was caused by the character, whose patron was an archdevil, repeatedly acting against his patron. I gave him many warnings, but the final straw was when the warlock killed his patron's favorite son, a pit fiend. I immediately asked him to make a new character and describe the gross transformation his character underwent to turn into a deathlock. He immediately started screaming at me about it being unfair that his character died so easily, despite my repeated warnings. He said that unless I brought his character back, he would leave the table, so now I'm conflicted. Was I in the wrong for killing his character, and should I revive it or just let him leave? Edit, forgot to mention that this character had made every character he'd ever played a murder hobo, and the warlock was no different. For this current campaign, I wanted to limit this behavior as much as possible, as it made the game not fun to DM and ruin the experience of other players. I had a conversation with this player during session 0 about not murder hoboing, and he agreed to try to limit it, but went back on this almost immediately. Edit 2. After discussing it with the rest of the party, I've decided to ban that player from my table and have cut contact with him. I don't feel like somebody who doesn't appreciate the time and effort I put into DMing and help facilitate a cohesive and satisfying story deserves a spot at my table. Okay, while I do understand where the DM is coming from, I do think it's bad form for them just to immediately, instantly kill off a player character. In the comments below, OP talks about how the patron was a non-essential part of the story, it wasn't a huge factor of it, and that he had given the player in question several warnings, whether they're subtle to eventually more escalating. Now, as someone who has made this mistake before, the best way you can prevent this is by talking with your players and giving them ample warning that what they're about to do might result in the death of their character. There is a strong chance that this player who was playing the warlock just thought that by killing the pit fiend, they would just end up with a slap on the wrist and that's it, and weren't expecting that to be the death of their character. A lot of it comes down to how clear and spelled out the warnings were that were being given to the warlock, as well as the fact of, I do have to ask if there were any personal kind of feelings when it came to killing this character off, because I have had my fair share of characters that I've wanted to kill off because of how frustrated I was with the way they were being played, because it felt like as a DM, I wasn't being respected. So I entirely sympathize with this DM here. However, it is bad form just to kill off a player character immediately without warning. However, it sounds like the dust is settled and the decision has been made, so there's not really much more input I can really give beyond just kind of, I guess, giving my advice to you guys, the audience. If you are ever in a position where something is going to injure or kill a character that is beloved and you don't want them to die, the best way that you can do this is to have consequences to the death. Like maybe they come back with amputation, or they have trauma attached to it, where when fighting that specific class of monster, they're at disadvantage for their rolls. Things like that can make a character death interesting, because it's not true death, but it also allows the character to continue to play their beloved OC, if that's what they're doing, while also having tangible consequences to character death. And when it comes to murder hobos, I'm still trying to figure this one out. My only recommendation is that a lot of the times the reason why players become murder hobos is because either they're new to being a player or they're not interested in the campaign. New players are expecting it to be more like Skyrim, where you kill your way through everything and yada yada yada, and they don't realize they have a full other arsenal of tools to actually use at their disposal within the campaign. So a lot of that is kind of just teaching the players they have more options to do things. Granted, my experience as a DM is somewhat limited in comparison, and I'm not, an all-seeing, all-knowing eye, but that's just what I know. Personally, I'd love to hear more audience input and seeing what you guys feel. I mean, how do you all deal with murder hobos? For those of you who are DMs, or for those of you players, why do you murder hobo? And how do y'all feel about the DM just instantly killing off a character? I personally think it was in bad form, but with all the, situations surrounding it, and because this is, of course, a story, we're missing a lot of key details, perhaps the DM was justified in their actions. But I'm going to stick with my thought that this was bad form, and perhaps they could have handled this a bit better, but I also do heavily sympathize with their choice, and that the reasoning behind it was sound. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code ODDS at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code ODDS directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code ODDS at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.